My name is Angela Brittain, and I currently live in Houston, Texas, in the USA. I've lived in many different places throughout my life, Johannesburg, South Africa being probably one of the most exotic places. I love Africa. I still go back frequently whenever I get the opportunity to. About me, I was raised in Florida on 100 acres with horses and cows, kind of living the farm life, chickens. And I thought to myself, I didn't really enjoy that type of life, so I couldn't wait to get into the big cities. So my background actually is in training. My education, I have a master's degree in education, but it is in the instructional technology side, which is actually the design of training programs. And I really liked doing that. I was a teacher while I was working on my master's degree and working for myself. The advantage that I had was because when I lived in South Africa, I developed a skincare product with a company down there, and it was actually tied for fifth place with in the US. We have a company, Consumer Digest type of thing, and they test products. And so they tested my product, little old me, along with 500 other products, and mine tied for fourth place. But the problem that I had when I left South Africa is I didn't have anyone down there to continue to develop the product for me or to do it, because I didn't have anyone there at the time who could do turnkey. Kind of an entrepreneur with a lot of things going on, but my friends told me that they were always coming to me for advice. And so I decided that I would go into coaching. So I went to the Life Solutions Institute with Mary Morrissey. I just really resonated with her because her backstory and my backstory are very similar. We both found ourselves, I hate putting this out there, I used to be so ashamed of this, but I'm not anymore because I overcame it. And we all need to realize that we have to love every part of ourselves, even the parts in those little dark corners that we try to hide away all the time. So Mary Morrissey, she tells her story freely, and I think she gave me the courage to start telling my story as well. We both found ourselves pregnant when we were in high school, and we were both kicked out of high school. So because back in the 70s when I was pregnant, it just wasn't a thing that was done. I think here in the US now, some of the high schools actually have daycare centers in them. It's it's definitely a different world we live in today. So I had to leave school, but I did go and get a GED, which is the equivalent of a high school diploma. And then I went on. I I've always felt so ashamed and so less than because I didn't have a degree. So I went to college and I got an undergraduate degree, and then that wasn't enough for me either. And so that's the reason why I went ahead and got my master's degree. And my son, just the other day, asked me when I was going to get my doctorates. But I told him it really wasn't worth it at this point in time. It, it wouldn't really make any difference in my life at this point. So what I'm doing now is I have just finished writing a book, and with my coaching certifications that I've had for several years now and been coaching people, I I was married to a narcissist for 14 years, and it was quite um, a rough time most of the time. But I'm such an optimist that I would always try to find the good in every situation. And I love this guy to the ends of the earth. And so I always felt like that if I just loved him a little bit more, he would come to realize what a wonderful human being I am, and he would be so in love with me. Well, that's a fantasy that I had, and I had it for a very long time. Uh, it didn't matter how much I loved him. He did not love me. He actually wrote me a letter and brought it to my office one day and told me in the letter, "I don't love you today. I didn't love you the day that I married you." So that was 3 years into the marriage, and I was just about ready to leave when I found out that I was pregnant. And so I thought, this will be the key. This will be the part that will change everything. And I have to say, he was and is a wonderful, wonderful father. He loves that our son to pieces, but he never he never developed into any kind of a husband. He would say mean things and do cruel things to me, never physical, but it was all very emotional abuse. And what I didn't understand, and what my mission is now, is to have women come to the understanding of what an abusive relationship is, because I think that there are still a lot of women like me who thought that if you were in an abusive relationship, that meant physical abuse. He never hit me, he never laid a hand on me, but it was the little mind games and the cruel things that he would say that just, I'm a strong, independent woman, and people that know me today are just amazed that I ever let myself be treated that way or endure that type of a situation. So, but again, I always thought he just needed more love. And my mother didn't help. God bless her. I love my mother to pieces. But she said, oh, he just needs more love, because she was from that era that, you don't get a divorce, you keep a stiff upper lip and you just carry on, stay calm and carry on and keep a smile on your face. And, so our friends, when we finally wound up getting the divorce after 14 years, um, they were all pretty shocked, they didn't know anything was wrong because all of this emotional abuse took place behind closed doors in our house. When we would go out, he would actually put his arm around me and act like we were a sweet, loving couple. And of course, I played along with it because it was too embarrassing for friends to know. So, I hid a lot of the abuse from my friends and especially from my family. But it was interesting when my son was about 9 years old. We're sitting on the sofa watching a movie, old black and white one, my favorites. But the husband walked into the kitchen and his wife was at the sink washing dishes, and he took her by the shoulders and turned her around and gently kissed her. And my son, who was sitting beside me on the sofa, was like, what are they doing? What is that? What are they doing? And he's 9, 10 years old at the time, and I said, honey, they're kissing. And then I realized he had never seen his father and myself show any affection between us. And so that was when I kind of started waking up a little bit. I thought, I've stayed in this terrible marriage for the sake of my child, but what am I actually teaching him? What is he learning? And I thought, I don't want my son to think that this is a normal relationship between a man and a woman. I didn't want him to grow up and then marry somebody and treat them the same way. So from that day, I actually started training him to be a gentleman. I would take him out for lunch and I would slide my credit card over to him. And I would tell him, when the waitress comes, you pay for the meal because a gentleman always pays for a lady's meal. And he was like, oh, okay. So he picked that right up. And then I would teach him when he had a little girlfriend, I'd say, oh, let's go buy her some flowers. Girls love flowers. And gentlemen always, buy their girlfriends little gifts and things. So I have to say that he's 35 years old today and his wife loves me. And she says, thank you for raising him to be such a wonderful man and such a gentleman, and he takes such good care of her and he loves her so much. So I'm really happy about that. But I did stay for, 3 to 4 more years. There were two things that happened that really shook shook my world. One day, my husband was out of town working, and my son said, "Let's grill some meat out on the gas grill. And I said, well, it's a new one and I don't know how to turn it on. Well, he was 11 at the time and he knew. He was always very bright. He said, well, I know how to turn it on. Dad has showed me how to do that. And I said, okay, well, you show me how then. So he showed me how to do the gas grill. And we were walking back inside the house after the grill was turned on. I was kind of talking to myself out loud and I said, you know, I've asked your father at least 5 or 6 times to show me how to turn that grill on, and he never has. I said, I don't know what's up with that guy. And my son looked up at me and with the innocence of a child, he said, well, I know why he hasn't shown you, Mom. And I said, oh, innocent me. I said, well, why is that, honey? And he looked up at me with the sweetest, most innocent face, and he said, Mom, Dad doesn't like you. And I was just I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. And that's when I went, I have to get out of this marriage. I have to get my son out of this situation. For him to know Dad doesn't like you, well, if you don't like somebody, you certainly can't love them. So that was a real key turning point for me. It was a wake up call. And I think it was only a couple of months after that that they would always go up to, the grandfather had a fishing camp up on a lake near a couple of hours from our house, and they would go up there almost every weekend. So this one weekend they're packing up and they're leaving to go, and I usually didn't go up there because I would stay at home where it was peaceful and quiet. Um, so they leave the house, and about a half an hour later, I hear a car in the driveway, and it's it's my husband, and he's coming in the door, and I look, and he doesn't have our son with him. And I said, you know, where's Josh? And he said, oh, he went on up to the lake with my parents. And I said, well, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I'm going to go up later. I have something that I have to do first. Okay. So I'm in the kitchen at the sink, and out of the corner of my eye, I see him walk into our living room, which we had white carpet and light colored furniture, and he's carrying a rifle. And I look at him and I say, what on earth are you doing with a rifle in the living room? And he said, oh, I have to clean it. Well, the TV was there, so he turned the TV on. So I'm thinking he's going to watch some fishing show and while he cleans the gun. And I said, well, be careful. Don't get, don't get anything on the carpet. He's like, don't worry about that. So a few minutes later, I hear him say, hey, come see. And so I step into the doorway from the kitchen into the living room, and he's sitting on the floor, and he has the rifle pointed in my face. And yeah, my knees just buckled. But I don't know. I heard this little voice in my head, and I don't know where I found the strength, but I heard this voice in my head say, no, don't turn and run. And so I just kept my eyes on his eyes. I thought if he's going to shoot me, he's going to have to look me in the eyes. And so I just stood there for a minute, and he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. And then finally, I just looked at him and I said, really? I said, what is your son going to think about this? And he never lowered the gun, but I very slowly backed away and then stepped out of the doorway back over into the kitchen. And I always kept my car keys hanging at the back door, so I just ran, grabbed my car keys. I didn't have my purse with me. I ran out, jumped in my car, and went over to a friend's house. And the next day, she went with me back over to my house. He wasn't there, and I just loaded my car with everything that I could possibly fit in it. I didn't even get all of my clothes, and left. And that was pretty much the end of that marriage. I mean, it took us over a year and a half to get the divorce finalized, but I never set foot back into that house until several months later, when a friend of mine, she had this big burly brother, and he took his truck and a little trailer behind it, a little flatbed type of trailer to put some stuff on. And he said, "We're going to get whatever you want out of that house. We're getting it today." And so my husband was at home when we got there, and he tried to block this guy from going into the house. And the guy said, "You don't want to mess with me. Step aside now." And he did. He intimidated him. So I did get several things out, but of course, not everything. So I kind of started from ground zero again with my life. Um, I did move out of Louisiana, where we were living at that time, into Houston because I knew the job market here would be better. And I came over with very little. My father had left me an inheritance, and I had found out right before the gun issue that he had been uh, forging my name on documents and had taken almost all of my inheritance money out of my account. So I didn't have, I was pretty much broke. I mean, I really started from nothing. I remember renting an apartment, and because I didn't have a job, they didn't want to rent to me, so I had to give them 3 months rent in advance, which I had enough in the account still to do that. And then I went to a furniture rental place where uh, they sold their old furniture that had been rented out for a while. And I remember buying a sofa and a coffee table. And the sofa, the reason I picked out that sofa was because it was the size of a twin bed, and I knew I would be able to use it as a bed. And the guy took pity on me and sold me everything. When I told him my story, I was probably even crying a little at the time I was telling this poor guy the story. He went over and talked to the manager, and they came back and they said, we'll take $100 for everything that you want. So yeah, thank goodness, the kindness of strangers. So I found a good job and just started rebuilding my life. And about 3 months after I had moved out of the house, I go to the mailbox and I get a lovely surprise in the form of a past due notice for a Visa card that I don't even have a Visa card. I was like, what is this? I called the company and they informed me that I had opened up that card about 3 months ago and had run it up to the maximum $10,000. And then I had skipped the last two payments. And so my ex-husband was using my good credit, and he opened up 5 credit cards, charged them all up to the maximum, didn't make a payment so that they would then become delinquent. And then he gave them my new address where I was living so that it forwarded them to me. So that was a nightmare. My credit then, which I had always prided myself on and was the way I was trying to live then since I had no money, my credit scores went into the 300s, which here in the US, that's almost as bad as you can get. So that cost me more money. So I decided I'm so broke, I'm going to go sell or hawk my diamond engagement ring. And I found this to be, I mean, at this point in time, I had to laugh to keep from becoming crazy. So I take it to a pawn shop, and the guy's looking at it, and he says, "This isn't even a diamond." And I said, "Well, what is it? What do you mean it's not a diamond?" And he said, "It's a cubic zirconium, which is fake. It's just fake, and it's worth nothing." And the guy probably thought I was nuts because I just looked at him and I went, "Well, that seems very appropriate because it seems like my whole marriage was a fake also. So it's only appropriate that the ring would be a fake too." So, I mean, it's, I just had to take one day at a time. So I got myself out of it. And so it's been, I guess, almost 20 years since all of that happened. And I was carrying it around with me all the time and retelling the abusive stories and reliving them. And that's not healthy. And my friends, of course, would say, "Oh my goodness, it's been so long, just get over it." And I'm thinking to myself, yes, they're right. I need to get over this, but I couldn't. So then when I started getting into counseling and talking to different people, they said, "You have PTSD." Well, my son was in the military, and I'm going, "No, no, no. I don't have PTSD. That's what you get when you're at war or fighting." And they said, "No, it's also what you get when you're in an abusive relationship, and especially one that lasted 14 years." So I had to get into not traditional therapy, but I tried several different uh, venues, and I found havening to be one of the most effective for me, and then writing a book. Writing a book has cleansed me of all of this, and I can't even I can't even begin to express the weight that I was carrying around. And once I finished the book, even before it was published, once I was able to put the pen down, it was just this giant weight was lifted off of me, and my whole attitude about everything changed. And I knew that now I can leave it behind. Now it is still, and it will always be part of my history, but I think it's made me stronger. And so my message, what I want people to know, especially women, is that we are so powerful that we can endure so much, and we have nothing in our lives to be ashamed of. I don't care what you've done. It's part of who you are. It's part of your story. It's part of what makes you the person that you are, the strong person that you are. And sometimes I think we're stronger than men. Honestly, it's it's just we can overcome so much. So I did write a book, and the title of the book is "You Can't Love Him into Loving You." That's what I tried to do, and like I said, my dear sweet mother was always going, "Oh, he just needs more love." So I just thought if I loved him enough, he would eventually, become the person that he originally presented himself to be, but was indeed not that person. Now my mission is to just coach women, and especially women who find themselves in abusive relationships. My problem was always, I actually feel like part of my problem did go back to my childhood, because I felt like my parents' love, I know they loved me to pieces, but I feel like I had to earn their love. I had to make straight A's on the report card, or I had to win at the rodeos. My dad always had me in rodeoing. So I had to place, I had to get a ribbon, I had to get a good report card, I had to get an A on a paper, something. I felt like there was, and at dinner parties when we were very young, my sister and I had to perform song and dance. So, yes, my parents were a little strange. But yeah, so it was almost like I had to do something in order to win their affection and love. And so as I grew into an adult, I was always seeking approval, seeking love, seeking validation from outside myself, until I went through this traumatic marriage and the recovery process afterwards. It wasn't until then that I learned everything has to, we have everything inside of us that we need. We just have to tap into it. We have to realize that we're here for a reason. We are special. We are one of a kind, and we each have a purpose here. And maybe my purpose now is to empower women not to give their power away. And when we say something like, "Oh, so and so made me angry," I stop people now and I say, "Don't give them your power." So the saying is, what other people think is none of your business. And that's so true. It may be because I'm getting older, that I care less and less what people think about me. But it's wonderful because I have a great peace inside myself. I know who I am. Yes, I've had to say goodbye to some friendships along the way, people who don't resonate or who don't understand who I am now. But that's okay, because for every friend that I've had to say goodbye to, I've made two new ones that are more in line with my thinking. I just feel like the planet is shifting and that the human consciousness is shifting, and I want to be a small part of it. I want to help people become aware of it. The Dalai Lama actually said that the Western woman, that women will be the ones who bring about the change in the world. And I believe that, and I see it happening more and more every day. But we each need to step up and do our part to bring more love and understanding to the world. Officially, the book, I have a copy of it here. It's only in paperback or ebook. So the book's officially out October the 15th. You can order it now. And it's also will be in Barnes & Noble stores as well. It's on their website. It shows up on their website now too, which is kind of exciting. I was going to tell you a quote that I read from Ann Landers. I don't know if she was a columnist. Yeah. So this lady wrote into her and said, I really want to get my college degree, but it'll take me 6 years to get it. And at that time, I'll be 46 years old. And Ann Landers wrote back, and I was a teenager when I read this, and it has stuck with me all my life. Ann Landers wrote her back, and she said, well, if you don't enroll in school and take the 6 years to get your degree, what will you be 6 years from now? It's kind of like the years are going to pass anyway. You'll be 6 years older, but you won't have a degree. You'll be 6 years older and you will have a degree. It doesn't matter if it takes 10 years. The time's still going to pass. So yeah, it's kind of like the time doesn't really matter and you're never too old. I love that.